Welcome to this week's episode of the Everything Went Black podcast. I'd like to welcome Will Smith of Reeking Aura and the Heavy Hole podcast to this week's episode. I've been actually a fan of Will's for quite a while. Back in the dim past, my old band Anodyne played a show with his old band Biolich. I'm a big fan of Reeking Aura, his current band, and Artificial Brain, a band that my other friend, Mike Paparo, is now the singer of, but Will was also the vocalist in that band. And I remember when Tombs was on tour with 1349, Artificial Brain played the Brooklyn date with us, and I was totally blown away by them. As you know, I don't operate in this world alone. I'm part of a larger group known as the Horsemen of the Podcast Apocalypse. At war with mediocrity. Kicking things off every other Monday, we have Horror Wolf 666, brought to you by Brandon Legion. Up next on Tuesday, Jackie Smith brings us Into the Necrosphere. Wednesday, you get two entries. You get Everything Went Black, as well as Iblis Manifestations, brought to you by Cheyenne of the band Trivax. I return on Thursday with Jeff Kashid and Mike Scandato for the Necromaniacs Horror Podcast. Thursday is also when the first of two Soul Knox episodes drop, brought to you by Carl Hikara. Friday, Mike's brother John Draper brings us Spitball Media. Saturday is a day off. But Sunday, Carl returns with Soul Knox Day 2. Carl and I are in the midst of doing our Darkness Weaves collaboration, where we discuss the work of Carl Edward Wagner. If you dig the show, please check out our Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get bonus episodes. $5 a month, you get bonus episodes, plus early access to the regular stream shows, when there is an early access, that is, unlike this week. For $25, you can become a sponsor. And also, if you just want to support the show, tell your friends about it, share it on social media, leave us a review. Preferably 5-star ratings are always appreciated. Will, once again, thanks for having me on your show, The Heavy Hole, a few months back. And it's for a while, it's been my intent to have you on Everything Went Black. So, but I wanted to space it out, you know what I mean? Since like I was on Heavy Hole, you got to give a little bit of a space. I figured I'd ask you on to Everything Went Black, you know? And I got to tell you, I've been a fan of your work since we played together way back. I don't even know what year it was in with Biolich.
What, that was before you were in Tombs? That what was that? Anodyne?
Yeah, it was like 2007 or something like that, 2006.
Yeah. We talked about that on when I had you on, but yeah, surprisingly, when I had you, that's like I think that's like 6 months ago or something. I think we started off the new year.
It was a while ago. Yeah,
time flies, man. I know exactly what like. I say it on my podcast so much. Like, there's so many guests, so little time, so many people.
Yeah, totally.
Old school, younger people from my personal life, people that I don't know yet, but I want to interview. You know. By the way, thanks for having me on the show.
Of course.
Rolling in hot right now. But yeah, man, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, Biolich was a great band. You know, and then I started, you know, you find out about one band and then you get into all these other oh yeah, this guy's in this band, and you got quite a body of work, man. I have to give you props for that. You know, I mean, I've only been in like a handful of bands, but it's like the material and your catalog, I haven't even heard a lot of the bands that you played in, but like the ones that I'm familiar with, you know, respect, dude. You do a lot, and it's cool.
Thank you for the compliment, man. I really appreciate it. And I've really tried. I've tried very hard to establish like a catalog and get out there and have a lot of recordings to my name and stuff. But I'm like extremely lucky to always be surrounded with talented musicians and be working with really great musicians too, man. So it's you know, luck and being in good company it plays a big part in that too, man. But you know, always staying in there, man. I really, I don't know how to do anything else. But
Dude,
you know?
So it was several years later, like almost a decade passed, and then we Tombs played with Artificial Brain
Mhm.
when we were on tour with 1349 at St. Vitus. And that was like the first time I saw you play with Artificial Brain. And that band blew me away. And then a few months, maybe a year later, I saw Artificial Brain with Imperial Triumphant at Trans Picos. I don't know if you remember that show.
Yes.
Random spot, like in Ridgewood.
What was that with? The shows get a little mashed up in my head now because it might have been two shows I'm thinking of, but there was what was the band now? I think a band from France. There were like maybe one or two international bands on the bill, if I remember right. But yeah, I remember that show, and Imperial Triumphant, and pretty amazing to watch that band kind of just come from out of nowhere
Yeah,
off and then see where their trajectory and where they're at today too,
absolutely.
reflecting on the older shows like that. Yeah, man.
Yeah, it
That
was
times. Yeah.
the reason why one of the reasons why I came to that show is Averturn played, which has got my former bandmate of mine, Garrett Busnick, plays in that band. And then I saw the rest of the bill and I was like, oh shit, this is going to be a great show. And so yeah, that era of you being the singer. Now Mike Paparo is the singer, and a friend of mine too. Mike Paparo is the Artificial Brain singer. And then out of nowhere, I find out about Reeking Aura. You know, in my mind, it's kind of like a super group. You know, it's got you, it's got Ryan, it's got Rick in it. You know, Terrell, and I think the first time I heard about Reeking Aura was on Into the Necrosphere. You know, on my buddy Jackie's podcast. And I was like, how did I not know about this band? It's got all these great players in it. And then since then I just, digging into that catalog. And I caught you guys in Carney when you played with Replicant. Like I think it was like last summer. That was like I think the first time I'd seen you guys play.
Yeah. It kind of for our local scene and our network of friends, it feels like something of a super group, or I don't want to say that in reference to my own project, but it definitely feels like a team up of sorts of people that have been around each other's peripheral scene for a while. And Ryan's not with the band anymore.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
but he did write like 90% of the first album and the initial 3-song EP, and was a crucial part of the band. And we wish him the best on all his other projects and endeavors, and our drummer's actually still working on a project with him. There's just been a lot. There's been like some shakeups in Reeking Aura. We have a new bass player,
Oh,
TJ,
okay.
who is in our drummer Hudson's other band Trog. And to be succinct about it, we wish Tom and Ryan all the best, and we have all the utmost respect for them. The issue, well, the parting of ways, I think, comes from last year was such a significant year for Reeking Aura. We did was it 2 weeks? We did a tour. It might have felt longer than it was because it was in August, and we went down to the deep south. But we toured but it was great because we toured in support of Pyrexia, ATOL, and Animals Killing People. And it was kind of a road dog experience, man, if I'm gonna put it out there, at least for us at where we're at, man, because of some of the circumstances and the heat. And we show up to North Carolina. There was no AC or fans in one venue. It was a little it was a little sick. It was a little DIY. But and then we were fortunate enough to open up for Mortician 2 nights in a row in New Jersey and New York. We played some great shows and got out on the road. And I think the thing is, Reeking Aura originally started like, you just use that word supergroup. Obviously I don't want to sound pompous and say that about the band, but it did initially start as kind of a studio project with a very select group of personnel. And we all, everyone, was kind of selected and was there for a reason. The original EP has Keith Harris of my other band Afterbirth on drums, and then Sam Sherrick plays drums on our full-length album. Sam is in pretty much every younger band on Long Island. I mean, Stabbed, Blame God, the list goes on. He's an Exsanguinated with me. So now we have Hudson Barth in the band, and he's helping us write the new album. He did the whole tour with us, and him joining the band full time, he was playing session drums for us at all the shows, and it just made
Right.
sense at a certain point for him to kind of be and now Sam said he might fill in for us if we need him to fill in. It's just kind of, they switched roles from like, full time guy to fill in guy almost. But now Hudson's like a full-time member of the band. He brings a strong writing hand. Him, Terrell, Rick, everybody's writing. TJ's writing, and we have a lot of material. And we're getting ready. I don't know when this episode's coming out, but we're playing the New York Death Fest, being booked and promoted by Gutter Christ,
Oh
coming
yeah.
up in two. And we got a few other shows that aren't announced yet through September and October. So we have like a bunch of new songs that we're getting ready to debut live. So we're kind of coming up on the cusp of something new. And again, all due respect and handshakes to our old bass player Tom, and to Ryan Lipinski, of course, for all, I mean, without them, we wouldn't have been able to get the band to this point and record what we have recorded and all that, So
Yeah,
in a
Ryan.
nutshell.
Yeah, I've known Ryan for years. I mean, he was in it, the Unearthly Trance connection. Like we played, tons of shows together, and we were on Relapse at the same time, and I've also been a huge fan of a lot of his other material. Like the Howling Wind, and you know, um, he's an incredible musician. And that was sort of like, when I found out about Reeking Aura, I was like, oh, Ryan. Then I heard him playing that style, and I was like, I never really heard Ryan play that style before, so it was really interesting to me.
Yeah, we owe him a lot, man. I think it all started out as him and Rick Habib of Gray Skies Fallen, obviously,
Yeah.
and my old band Buckshot Facelift. They wanted to do a project together, and more, the more it developed, we all ended up in a room together, and we ended up recording the EP and the album. And I think it transformed into something that was more about, we want to try to, we started working with a booking agent from Continental Booking for a
Oh,
while.
you guys are booked by them too? So are we. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. The thing being, we haven't been able to say yes to anything a while. But that's part of what I'm getting at is too, like, we wanted to maybe try to get on some fests, try to get on some more tours. We weren't dissuaded by our voyage to the South last summer, but we thought maybe we'll do it in the winter next time. But we want to get out there on the road and tour. We would like to support other bands that we look up to. And the road thing, the touring thing, that's not necessarily for everyone. So that was
Yeah.
kind of, and diverged a little bit. And now we have some different people in the lineup who are more on that path, so to speak. And we're writing the second album. We're, about 5 songs into the next album, and just kind of, we switched gears a little bit. It took a few months. The winter and the spring, we were kind of just all reformulating things and going through it, and now we've been at a real regular rehearsal schedule, and we got the shows booked, so it feels good, man. you know
That's awesome, man. Now let me ask you a question. Do you guys practice in Jersey or on Long Island? Like how do you guys manage that with that? That's geographically the two places aren't that far apart, but trying to get from point A to point B in this environment here is challenging. So you said you're getting more on a regular practice schedule. How do you guys pull that off?
well, it's not the worst drive that I have, but I'm looking. I want to say the actual town, because it's Smack Tone Studios in New Jersey, and that's in Woodland Park, New Jersey. Okay.
Okay.
Um, and that's relatively close because I'm the only Long Island resident in the band at the moment. That we also
Oh,
some of the lineup stuff, even though most of even like Tom and Ryan were originally Long Island guys and they live in Jersey. Everyone lives in Jersey now. So the band is basically based out of New Jersey, except for me, now that I
okay.
it out loud. But yeah, it's not bad. We do Sundays. It's not the worst drive because I kind of just avoid the city and drive straight into North Jersey, and we get it done. The thing is, the band's just had growing pains because it did honestly start in earnest as more of a studio project type of thing, and developed into, like, we're gonna all get into a van and be sweaty and be miserable together, for a few days type of thing. So, like, and now we kind of feel like we've kind of grown out of the growing pains and we're on track to move forward with album number 2. So it does feel good to rehearse, even though there's traffic every now and again.
Yeah, yeah, totally, dude. I mean, I used to, I've only been living in Jersey for like, this is like my fourth year out here. And I used to commute out here for the band. The band has been based in New Jersey for a while now, but I used to drive out from Brooklyn, and during the week, that Belt Parkway across Staten Island, that haul has always been real challenging, you know what I mean? But yeah. So
Yep.
let me ask you a question, man. All right. One of the coolest things about metal is that you got Ronnie James Dio and you got George Corpse Grinder. right? They both play metal, but they're completely different. And people that like Dio, everyone's into it. You know what I mean? Like, we like guttural vocals and we also like Bruce Dickinson. You know what I mean? We like King Diamond, you know.
True. True.
We like Chris Barnes. We like all these guys. How did you get and you're a vocalist, right? Now, did you play another instrument before you started singing, or how did you get into this whole thing? Like
Not really.
drums?
I no, I mean, I literally started the first time I did guttural death metal or guttural vocals over like noise core, whatever you want to call it. Back then was I must have been maybe 14 or 15 years old. Um, I've told versions of the story, but my friend Adam Rotella, who has the kind of like the cult gore noise project, Anal Birth, since the 90s, he's the guy with the real stories. He'll tell you about seeing, internal bleeding and death and suffocation at the Roxy in Huntington and all that sort of thing. And I was the same age as his younger brothers, and their house was like the neighborhood hangout spot. So I was a kid that was into, like, I was 14. I was into maybe Sepultura, Iron Maiden, Pantera,
Yeah.
like probably 1996, 7-ish. And I don't know about death metal in the underground. I mean, someone might have shown me a Cannibal Corpse tape or something, and I didn't really know. But Adam is my friend's older brother, and he's getting packages in the mail when I'm over there on the weekends from Brazil, the lymphatic phlegm demo. I mean, really, and showing us, and I'm like, what? That this is so I'm kind of like going straight underground without, and Adam, next thing I know, Adam's making me mixtapes because this is the 90s cassettes, Dead Infection, Cryptopsy, Mortician, Squash Bowels. And I got into some of the bigger, more quote unquote mainstream death metal bands like Cannibal Corpse and Deicide and Morbid Angel, like later on in my teens, because Adam was just like, here's all this crazy underground stuff that I already know about. And Adam was very big back in the day on trying to get other people who were interested in it to do a project, like some sort of gore noise or gore grind project with him and a drum machine and his Tascam, cassette 4-track. He always
Oh
had
yeah, I
those.
remember those. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, he recorded just some blast beats with a drum machine and made some noise with a guitar and gave me a microphone. I tried my best to do some sort of version of what I thought these guys were doing, and that's kind of how it evolved. And then I heard he when this in this same era, he was dubbing me the Afterbirth Psychopathic Embryotomy demo, the original Afterbirth demo from New York from the 90s. I joined the band in 2016,
Yeah.
um Demolich from Finland, their Nesmith album, which is obviously they've enjoyed a great resurgence the last few
Yeah.
years. And Matty Way of California's Disgorge. When he was in them, that I saw Matty Way front Disgorge live. I think it was the first Bloodletting America tour and at Milwaukee Metal Fest in 2000. And he wore like the executioner mask and actually spoke and did this monologue before the songs. I think you hear it on the album in the guttural voice like that. So yeah, I wanted to learn how to do this guttural froggy voice, and I learned how to do that many years before I feel like I got to a comfortable place with the more traditional throaty death metal roar that a lot of people do. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
story short of it is. I just happened upon being friends with someone whose older brother was mainlining gore grind and gore noise.
Yeah, I always like that super raw like grind with the programmed drums and like the super brutal. It's almost like for me, from my perspective, it's obviously like metal, but there's an element of it that almost reminds you of like White House or like some sort of like noise industrial, like really, that really dark misanthropic British stuff, you know what I'm saying? Or Japanese stuff too.
Yeah, yeah, and those worlds do converge at times too, man, for sure. There's all types of spectrums of gore grind and gore noise and harsh noise and gore
Yeah.
beyond necropsy from Japan comes to mind doing collaborations with Merzbow, you know.
Yeah, that line has always been very blurry, and it's a really interesting place to like, come out of, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
yeah, so that was kind of like the way you got into it, right? And kind of like everyone else, like just listening to Maiden and Pantera and Slayer and all that sort of stuff. And then you had that one guy who showed you the darkest recesses, right?
Yeah, pretty much, man. I mean, I've told the story before where like someone had loaned me like a Cannibal Corpse Butcher to Birth cassette, maybe like a few months or a year prior to me starting to hang out with Adam. And I rejected it. I wasn't into it. It was like too dark for me or something at 13 years old. And then like at 14, I was like, whoa, like, you know, full on, gore maniac or something. So it's interesting how it just kind of, took, and then, I joined my first band, my first full lineup performing
Yeah.
live, Cursed Earth, or I was 15 when I joined Cursed Earth, and all those guys were into their 20s. Maybe one of them was 19, man, and they were looking for a singer. And again, Adam was a few years older and knew them from death metal shows. My friend Chris is looking for a singer. Will, and Adam didn't even think Will's 15. Adam was just like, Will can do vocals. He wants to do it, and he set me up with these guys. I used to take at 15 years old. I used to work at the Cinema Arts Center in Huntington as a usher, and then get off at like 9 p.m. and then take a train from Huntington out to Valley Stream and rehearse with them. And if New York death metal people who know the underground stuff, now that everything's on the internet, people might remember Umbilical Strangulation, which was the drummer Chris Michaels, and Paul Tavora, who was on Dehumanized Controlled Elite album and played with Dehumanized for many years after he was in Cursed Earth with me when I was in high school, man. So, and that the vocals in that, I was just trying to do the devourment, no pronunciation, guttural, thing, and that's what that really was. And we played a lot of shows at Castle Heights in Queens.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man, and I'm just proud of that. That back in the day, as a teenager, I wasn't popular in high school by any stretch, but I had a job. I always worked, and I always had a job in high school, and I always had a death metal band that was playing shows. I can look back at that. So that's and then after that, and then I mean, once I got out of high school, let's have three bands.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I think the not popular in high school angle is I think we all share that same angle and that it got into this kind of music.
I had friends, and I remember specifically senior year, it got easier because all the older kids that used to give everybody shit were gone. But there was some kids that were into hardcore and a few whatever rando kids that were into different shit. But yeah, everybody's got the same more or less suburban metalhead story. I think I had it pretty easy compared to some people, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So for me, listening to Reeking Aura and then what you were doing in Artie Brain, it's like the vocal styles are different. You know what I mean? Like you're doing like kind of like the squealy, more squeal stuff in Artie Brain, and the Reeking Aura's material. It's almost like more of like a brutal, like old school sort of vocal style. Like how do you come up with the different sort of like when do you pick what's appropriate for what project?
I mean, at the risk of sounding like corny or pretentious, it's like the music almost chooses it because when I hear the instrument for you're talking about Artie Brain for those instrumentals. Back then, I wasn't exactly even when I first joined Artificial Brain. I don't think I would be capable of the Reeking Aura vocals because, like I said, that style came later to me. The
Okay.
guttural pop style is like my comfort zone, but also Artie Brain was kind of technical and weird and
Yeah.
dissonant.
Very weird. Yeah.
It just, yeah, Demolich and stuff. Whereas Reeking Aura, I mean, Ryan. Ryan is
Oh
a
yeah.
old Bathory kind of roots metal guy in many ways, and that obviously influenced a lot of the stuff he wrote for us. And I wanted to do that justice. I didn't want to. I felt like doing the frog voice over that maybe wouldn't do justice, and it wasn't where I wanted to go. I wanted the project to have a little bit more of a raw, like you said, old school kind of feel. There are a few frog parts. I throw it in there at times, but it's always in the toolbox, but it takes a back seat sometimes. And I also always, because I'm still in Afterbirth, and in Afterbirth, the guttural voice is always kind of the main thing. So when I'm in two bands, three bands at the same time, I try to have a somewhat different vibe and persona and sound to each band. I don't want them to start to blend together as a frontman. So that's part of it too.
Yeah, that's one of the things I always kind of admired about like your approach to this stuff is that it's definitely, it sounds like you, but you're picking different aspects of it depending on the project. So now as far as like other active bands, Exsanguinated, is that's still active too?
Yes, we it's reactivated, I'll say, because we recorded a 2-song EP demo, whatever you'd like to call it. I feel like we're going on 3 years now, but we recorded it a while back. when things were shut down and pretty quiet. And then we have played a bunch of shows though, and we did a 2-week tour with Mutilatred last summer. We just came back and we played such a great show. Amityville Music Hall here on Long Island had shut down and renovated, and then they reopened, and we played the first death metal show back on July 13th. It was Scattered Remnants, Mortician, Mutilatred, and Final Resting Place, and Exsanguinated was fortunate to open that show. And there is a label behind the scenes that expressed interest in if we recorded a full length. There's people, thank you so much to anyone out there who's still pumping that 2 songs and is telling us you'd like to hear the band do something more, because we do have plans. The only thing is, all those guys are in the band Stabbed from Long Island, who, if you look them up, they're obviously doing things, playing festivals, doing shows. And the drummer is Sam Sherrick, who I said is in a million bands, very high demand drummer here on Long Island. I'm doing my thing with the podcast and Reek and Afterbirth. So Exsanguinated, the stars have to align a little bit. But it's, as far as we're all concerned, it's a band and it's got an album coming.
And you mentioned that Afterbirth is still active too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. Afterbirth rehearses every 2 weeks, every Sunday afternoon, like clock, whether there's an album coming, a show coming or not. I mean, it is even if it's just the guitarist and the drummer, those guys are always writing. Right now we're working on the next album. We have a show come up September 21st. We got a show come up at the Long Beach Brewery here on Long Island, with Thetis, Organ Dealer from New Jersey, Left to Rot from Texas. A bunch of great bands are on that bill. September 21st. People look up Afterbirth. Yeah, Afterbirth, like I said, that's a band that was around originally in the 90s here on Long Island, kind of a hallmark slam guttural Long Island style band in the era of Internal Bleeding and Suffocation, when they were doing their thing, initially. They took a hiatus, came back, and they recorded some material. And I joined the band in 2016, and I've done 3 albums with them now. And we're looking to do album 4, hopefully next year, man. And rest in peace to the original singer, Matt Duncan, man. Definitely like one of the prime inspirations. Like you were asking before about me doing the vocals when I was younger. So it's a very, I look at it as like I have to have a lot of respect for being the singer of Afterbirth. Coming from, it almost raised me as a death metal vocalist, so to speak. So yeah, Afterbirth is definitely working hard still behind the scenes.
And now is Buckshot do anything anymore, or is that over?
Well, I wouldn't blame you for thinking it's over, because we haven't done any. I think we hadn't played a show in over 5 years now. We're doing a reunion set
Oh,
at the Barely Breathing Fest here on Long Island. Yeah, that's in August, man. I don't want to say the wrong date here, but that's at Mr. Beery's in Bethpage here on Long Island in August. We did a whole interview on my podcast with the guys booking that. And yeah, Buckshot Facelift is coming back to do a reunion set. It's the first or second week of August. People go on social media, man. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but yeah, Barely Breathing Fest here on Long Island. Buckshot Facelift's doing a reunion set. And whether or not Buckshot does some stuff beyond that, it's not like it's not like we don't have any plans of just breaking up and calling it quits after that. But there's also reasons why the band, most of Buckshot Facelift became Reeking Aura, and that also plays into Reeking Aura getting out and playing shows more, because Buckshot Facelift wasn't able to, not for any personal reasons. Our drummer just has a career and a young family and isn't able to commit to shows and tours as much. But it's one of those situations where there's one member of the band who's so much the personality of the band, it doesn't make sense to get a session guy. Like we couldn't get a session drummer for Buckshot Facelift. You know what I mean? It just wouldn't make sense. It's his band in a sense. So we do Reeking Aura with most of the guys from Buckshot Facelift now. And, like this fest is a great opportunity. Maybe now there's more people that know about Buckshot Facelift, and maybe we'll get a show once or twice a year. Who knows? I don't know, but Buckshot still, we never broke up. It's just kind of out there, and everyone's, the whole circle, although most of those guys are Gray Skies Fallen as well. And, everyone's doing projects.
well, that's the beauty of playing in a band with like people you're friends with too. Where it's like it is no, you're friends, so there's no real reason to stop doing it. You might take long breaks between stuff. You know what I mean? And it's just like eventually, it's like you seem to come back full circle. Like the guys in Tombs, like those guys all play in in a bunch of different bands together, and other, there's a similar to New Jersey. There's like similar to Long Island. Jersey has like a whole, you know, all these guys. I'm trying to explain to you, all these dudes. But it's like everyone's in bands together. They might not do anything for a really long time, but then eventually they're playing shows again or making a record or doing something cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's exsanguinated too, like I was saying. So I got a couple of bands on the back burner, a couple of bands doing something, it's how it is, man.
Yeah. Actually, Mr. Beery's is that's a really cool spot. One of our I think maybe like our like eighth show we played there with Black Anvil and Inhuman. It was the place rules. I that's like one of the few times we actually played out on Long Island, and that was like a lot of fun playing out there.
It's a definitely a Long Island place, man. It's funny but with Black Anvil, of course, man. Those guys, I think most of them are from Long Island. Yeah, Beery's is like one of those places where they'll let you have the show and they'll let you do what you want, man. You know what I mean, man? The stage isn't necessarily set up for grind and death metal in the room, but it just works. It's
Yeah, I love spots like that.
and when they do this Barely Breathing Fest, as long as the weather permits, it's great because they set up a lot of merch and they even have some other people like, like distros, labels, whatever, come down and set up. They have a little, punk rock flea market type of vibe. So it's fun, man. Mr. Beery is a cool spot for sure.
There's a spot like that out on Staten Island too. The name is escaping me, man, but it's like a similar type of. It's got a Beery's vibe, and they have like an outdoor section too.
Other pugs, maybe?
Yeah, that's it. Mother Pugs. Yeah,
Mother
yeah,
pug. I love that. The Mr. Beery's of Staten Island, man. We
yeah. It is kind of.
Buckshot's played there a few times with Torturous Inception from Staten Island for sure, man. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like yeah, it's definitely the Beery's of Staten Island, and but the funny thing, they've had shows there, like Agnostic Front played there and stuff too. When and like there was, I think they were doing like one of these five borough tours or some kind of thing where they played a show like in the Bronx, Staten Island, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and they played a show. That place, I wasn't there because I didn't want to get like like completely like brutalized at a show like that because that's a way too small for a band like Agnostic Front to be playing.
Yeah. Well, I don't I'm not from Staten Island. I just know kind of because Rick from Gray Skies and from
Yeah,
Reeking, Staten Island guy, and so I know him and a few other Staten Island guys by way of that, but I'm almost sure it's easier to get to some parts of Long Island than to get back and forth from Staten Island if you're trying to go to shows in New York City. Like isn't Staten Island kind of like isolated as a borough? Like it's not like Queens and Brooklyn where you kind of just back and forth depending where you
yeah.
go.
If you live in Brooklyn, it's way easier to go to, or Queens, it's way easier to go to Long Island. But for me in Jersey here, it's like I live like you could throw a rock from where I live and it'll land in Staten Island. It's like we just moved to Linden, which is like right over the Gothels from Staten Island.
That's what I mean. It's like they have their own little scene out there, that
Yeah.
like Knocks the Front could probably do like and they have a lot of band. They have like Tombstoner is doing a lot of stuff. I see their name out all the time. And Festergore is from Staten Island. Staten Island's got some stuff going on out there, man. So
It's like Staten Island as a place, you know what I mean? As like a borough is pretty grim, you know what I mean? Like as far as like to live there. So that's why I always imagine like back in the day that band CR was from Staten Island, like this like grind band. And I'm like, of course that band's from Staten Island as a result, as a sort of like a response to living in that environment, you know what I mean?
yeah, it's like either that or like super depression, like Gray Skies Falling and
Gray
Evoking.
Skies Falling, Evoking, yeah, like yeah, well, yeah, Bayonne, Staten Island guys, and yeah, Evoking and Gray Skies. I see you representing Gray Skies Falling, your
Yeah.
bandman, Rick. Got to have him on the show too with Gray Skies. But what's actually now that you bring that up, it's interesting. Both Gray Skies and Reeking Aura have records. You have a record out on Profound Lore, and so how did that connection come together with Chris?
Well, I've been dealing with Chris Bruni since the Artificial Brain days, and never had any issues at all. I've been in other projects that have been on other labels, and there's been certain issues and headaches. I have never had any issues working with Chris Bruni and Profound Lore Records, and I think he curates an interesting roster all the time. You kind of yeah, I feel like any band any of my bands that he's worked with, it's like we're always going to fit in because he's always, there's always something there. You know what I mean? So it's like you never really feel like you're an oddball because everyone's an oddball in a way, man. He's he's got a certain style, but he throws some curveballs in there too, man. I like, I like that the label has some very dependable death metal and black metal and doom releases, but he's not afraid to take chances, man. And so yeah, so we with Reeking Aura, I don't want to say off the top of my head. I have to check like Metal Archives, but I'm pretty sure Unearthly Trance has worked with Profound Lore. Or if not them, I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan has some sort of rapport with that label, or at least that the label would respect bringing that name to the table. So obviously, having Ryan, in the band at that point and doing a lot of the creative work helped us out. And uh he was just he was interested enough to put us on, and he's also, we're working with him for the second upcoming album as well. We're in communication with him. We're using the same um uh cover artists, Eon Carcellin for the next album. I'll tell you that too, man. But yeah, I mean, I'm not dissing any other labels, but I've never had a bad experience working with Profound Lore for sure. So I was very happy that he was supportive of Reeking Aura, and we had a history before that.
Yeah, I always like Chris's approach to the stuff he put out. It's like there's something for everybody on Profound Lore, but there's also like there's like a thread, like sort of an aesthetic, even between like the black and death metal bands. There seems to be like a vibe that's sort of you can pick out this. It's almost it's like if you like this band and it might be a completely different style, but if it's on Profound Lore, you're probably gonna like this other band. You know what I'm trying to say? There's something about the way Chris curates his roster that there's a characteristic about all the bands that kind of fit together, even though they don't really sound anything alike sometimes. Like even a band like Pallbearer still is still out of that sound, has something in common with a band like Portal in a weird way. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I think so, definitely. In especially just in terms of like being a little bit on the cutting edge, but also a little bit in traditional. You know what I mean, man? There's always,
Yeah.
like some there for everyone for sure.
Yeah. So now let's talk about the podcast. Like, I'm a fairly regular listener too, man. Like I really enjoy the stuff you're doing. I particularly dug the Long Island black metal episode you guys did, where like, oh, this is going back a while. And you know, talk about I never even heard of 90% of the bands that you guys talked about. And I had to go on YouTube and find out about a lot of this stuff, which I thought was really cool.
But was that a Patreon episode?
No, no, it was on the regular stream, man.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, I know. We do a lot of episodes. I lose track.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, totally.
yeah, well, dude, if I remember correctly, we um there was the Long Island Heavy Metal History Facebook group, which we interviewed Tom Meehan. We did an episode with him. He curates that and that whole thing. And I put some feelers out to like a bunch of my old school friends. I think I credit most people in the interview who helped me out with that. So there was a lot of research that went into that, and also Metal Archives. Like, their filter, filtering into Long Island in certain years, and black metal helped out. And yeah, man, there were certain bands where I realized I kind of knew certain guys or whatever, and then there were other
Yeah.
bands. They're from the same town as a bunch of people I know, and I've never heard of this band or whatever. So we just dug up a bunch of weirdo stuff, man. There was some cool bands, there were some not so cool bands, So
Yeah.
yeah, that was fun. We should I feel like we should do another one sometime soon too, because there's like no shortage of them, especially when you look on Metal Archives.
Dude, I appreciated the efforts that you guys put into that because I remember I was driving and I'm like, I need to write this shit down, man. So like I pulled over at a rest stop and I was like, I like backed up and I'm like, all right, well, this band sounds like that. All right, this is the one with the synthesizer, keyboards. And like I wrote down these names and then like over the next few days I like was on YouTube checking it because a lot of stuff you're not gonna find it on Spotify or like Apple Music. A lot of stuff is just cassettes that someone put on YouTube, and it was just really fun, you know.
Yeah, YouTube is the go-to for a lot. I try not to ever. I have once or twice, but I have a little rule where I try not to talk about anything on the podcast that there's not a reference online for people. Like,
Yeah,
if I CD or some tape in there, that it hasn't been ripped online yet. Like, I'm not going to just do that just to flex on the listeners. Like, I try to make sure you can at least go to YouTube and check it out for a few minutes, man. But there's some things out there that are hard to find. Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some things that just don't exist, man. It's funny because like the years that I've spent, like over the years, you're playing shows and touring or whatever, and you get some sick bands that I've seen, right? That just have a demo and never really did like you're playing like Plattsburgh, New York or something like that. You know what I mean? And there's like a band that maybe played 3 shows and they made like a CDR, and that's got that you're not going to find that anywhere. You know what I mean? I have it. I have like the CDR that they made, but like how do you can't, it's not like it's not even on YouTube. The band barely exists, but it's like the sickest thing you've ever seen in your life. What comes to mind, we played a show at this band called the Dying Game Theory in Plattsburgh, New York, in a basement. This is like 1999, maybe. Different Anodyne, right? This is like it was like seeing like a grindcore like Neurosis play in front of like 10 people in a basement when it's like -5 degrees outside in the middle of the woods. And it was like literally one of my top 5 favorite shows of all time, man. And then the band just like disappeared into thin air, you know? And then like a year later, I'm in Poland and someone had bootlegged a cassette of like a greatest hits Anodyne like side. And on the other side was the Dying Game Theory demo.
No way. That's weird.
Dude, 100%. Somehow someone found out about this obscure band and I was in Poland and that's what I saw. It's
That,
incredible, right?
yeah, man. Maybe early MySpace or something. That's weird. That's
Yeah, but
that's
it,
that's
yeah,
funny.
well, did MySpace exist in the late 90s? Or maybe this is like 2001 or something like that?
No, no.
Friendster, who knows, man?
Did you buy it?
Of course I have it. It's a cassette, man, and it's like the thing is too, it's like, you know, the guys in that band did other things, and Plattsburgh was almost like this town that we would play through all the time, and we had like a little following there. We were friends with everyone. These guys all did different bands, and there was always maybe like I think one guy was like the dude who was like emailing guys in Europe and trying to connect. So he might have been behind the whole thing. You know what I mean? Like he probably was the demo trading guy.
It's just funny. Yeah, no, it's just a funny story, man. And upstate New York was definitely like the area for I remember that late 90s, early 2000s kind of grindy, noisy metalcore. All of a sudden genres were just blurring, man, and
Yeah,
upstate
yeah.
a lot of shit going on for sure, man. And a lot of CDR demos lost to time or put up on MySpace and it's now defunct or something, man. I have a demo that every once in a while I'll check back on Metal Archives just to see if someone listed it or to see it or on YouTube. There was a band called Disgusting from
Disgusting.
yeah, from Massapequa here in Long Island, New York. They just, young guys. I mean, it was they're probably they're probably from my generation. But we were all in our 20s. It was when Biolich played with them a few times. And they were, they were good, kind of brutal death metal, kind of sounded Cannibal Corpsey, which for 2004 was weird. You know what I mean? They weren't doing the cool thing
No,
back then.
yeah, yeah.
Had this cool CDR demo with a hand-drawn drippy blood logo on it. I still have it in a box with all my other little CDR and flimsy little case demos from back in the day. But yeah, I just think about stuff like that, like how many other bands are lost to time. We don't really have everything on the internet. We just think we do.
Yeah, that's the stuff I'm interested in, man. It's like the stuff that is so fleeting and just disappears, and like, but that could have been like the biggest band in the world if they'd stayed together or didn't live in some obscure town somewhere. That's always the stuff that I love, you know what I mean? I'll go back and listen to that shit and I'll just be like, whatever happened to these guys? Like, the one dude like become like a vice president of like a bank or something like that. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, well, like that stuff, like I mean, we all know it's like a meme by now that the singer of the Red Chord is like a in law enforcement.
Yeah. Yeah, Guy. I know Guy.
Yeah, there's I think it's one of the guitarists of Indecision is like in public office in New York City. It
Yeah.
might be a different band. Maybe it's a different band, but it's, yeah, like a hardcore band that was big from Long Island in New York City in the 90s. One of them is like I think maybe, an assemblyman or something like that. So it's like, it's funny, yeah, like people grow up and get jobs and do stuff, and like it's funny sometimes when you see where people end up, for sure, man. You know?
Yeah, guy's a cool. He's cool. I like that dude. Like he
And
was like a real hands-on sort of guy. Like he had a label, and when the first time, well, Red Chords kind of they put out their back, I guess now, and
yeah, they're making moves for sure,
yeah,
man.
yeah, they were always a great band live. They're incredible players. Guy was a great front man, and but I remember back in the first era of the band, he was like a very, very good behind the scenes sort of guy. Like he had the label that he was doing. He was like, I think he was even promoting shows in Massachusetts for a while or doing something. He was like the guy that was like making moves, like connecting the dots. You know what I'm trying to say?
Undercover, bro.
Yeah, he's an undercover guy. You know what I mean?
No, no, I do like the red cord. No disrespect to him. I'm not bringing that up to disparage him. I got no problem with his job or his band. But yeah, but it is just funny. Like you're talking about, like what happened to these people, where they end up, and you kind of find out. There's great stuff too. Like what's this comp, man? There's this like cult death metal comp, Heralds of Oblivion. And there's this band, I think it was Catalepsy on there, that just recorded 3 songs for this comp that came out or whatever. And I remember going on in like YouTube comments and people being like, "Oh, the guitarist used to do this. He was in this rap metal band." Now that I look up the rap metal band he was in, and now, and none of this stuff is even available on Discogs or anything. It's like you said, it's funny to see what where things went, that you don't know.
Yeah. So how long have you been doing Heavy Hole? Like how long has that show been in existence?
Hard to believe. It feels to me like we just started it, which is weird because we've gone through a lot of eras and different formulations of co-hosts and stuff. But we started in 2019, or like February 2019, I want to say. So that's about 5 years now, man, which is wild. I think we're somewhere around 300 something episodes. And like I said in the beginning, it was myself, Justin Wall, and Tom Saltman in a room on every episode recording. And it's since kind of evolved to like I do everything remotely in my office, and I have a rotating door of co-hosts, including Tom. Justin still does a lot of the graphic design and stuff behind the scenes, so they're still on the team, but things have definitely changed and evolved, and we found our format. I think if you listen to the older episodes in like the first year or two, it would probably have a somewhat different tone than it does now, which is just for better or for worse. There might be people who prefer the older stuff, but it's evolved and it's grown a little bit, man. It's hard to believe how long I've been doing it because it's such a regular part of my life. And maybe you get this too, because it's like I hear you saying, you're writing down a band I was talking about and you listen to the podcast. Me, when I record these podcasts and these interviews, I put them out, I do a little social media, and it's like I don't process that there's like people listening to it, and there's
Oh yeah.
years and months after the fact there's people listening, someone's listening to 5 episodes because they gotta stay up at work or something, you know what I mean? And like, and we get emails and we get feedback from time to time, but it's just hard to be present with that idea sometimes, that there is a listener, there is someone on the other end of this all the time. And so I don't know, man. It's the podcast is a funny kind of like superfluous thing in my life in a way like that. I don't You don't get to see people in front of you like when you're performing music, maybe.
Yeah, it's like right now we're having this conversation and it doesn't feel like once we hang up, it feels like it just disappears, but it's going to go out and people are going to hear it, and I'll get messages about it and you'll get messages about it, and it'd be like, and the coolest thing about it is like when I go out on tour, like I run into all kinds of people that are like, "Hey man, I listen to the show." I'm like, "That's fucking awesome, dude. I love it." And and actually I ripped off an idea from you guys in my other podcast, the horror one I do with Mike and Jeff, Necromaniacs. You guys have callers. We started doing callers. And that feedback is trippy too, man. And that's like the coolest thing ever is like when someone calls in to like, we got one of those, Google Voice mail, and they're just like, you know, I recommend this, or this was cool, or this sucks, or whatever, and it's just like, and we have like regular callers too. And like, I got that idea from you guys. Like, you guys have a couple callers here and there.
Well, yeah, that's Tom's idea. And we honestly don't get as many voicemails as we used to. Maybe that's also because of the kind of the format and the tone of the show
Yeah.
now. Voicemail number out there. But that was Tom's idea back in the day. And we still, every once in a while, like, maybe once a month or so, we'll do a voicemail episode. But I always try to do it when Tom's there. So it could kind of like to harken back to the original tone of the show in a way, man. And, uh, it's to me, it's just like it anchors you a little bit. It reminds you that there's people out there listening, man. Something I had a big adjustment period with the podcast. Like, what do I say? I don't want to I don't want to accidentally offend people. I don't want to alienate people who are into my band but don't necessarily like my podcast personality. You like overthinking it in a way, I think. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Hmm.
And you get used to it, and you kind of realize what you want to do with it, and you'll be okay as long as you stick to what that type of thing.
Yeah, dude, I way in the beginning of this podcast, I put my foot in my mouth a bunch of times. Like I every now and then, like to humble myself, I'll take an episode from the vault and I'll put it up, something from like 10 years ago or something. Just I listen to it, my voice sounds different. It's like like completely stumbling over everything and saying the stupidest shit ever. And I put those out there now for people who listen to it who might not have heard those early episodes. And it's like it's pretty funny actually. If I don't have something for a week, it's like a holiday or something like that. I'll put like a from the vault episode just for laughs.
Yeah, yeah, man. I mean, and people probably listen to it and they're like, "Wow, that was a great episode." They don't even hear it the way you know what I mean. Like it's funny like that. I mean, the gore noise demo I made when I was 14, I cringe if I even put a second of that on. But there's some guy in a tape label in Florida somewhere that wants to do a little tape run of it. So I mean, what can I say? You know what I mean? I don't know.
Well, Long Island has a rich history of bands. I mean, of course, Internal Bleeding, Suffocation. Like those are the big heavy hitters from Long Island. Now, I got to ask you, man, you're a little bit younger than me, but what are your thoughts on Twisted Sister?
Twisted Sister. Great. Well, they're a great iconic Long Island act, first of all, that like way cooler than, Billy Joel, which I could listen to a couple of Billy Joel singles, but that's kind
Sure.
of like people always talk Billy Joel if you talk Long Island Music Hall of Fame and all that stuff. And it's just like, all right, we get it, but yeah, Twisted Sister is, at least to me, a more respectable metal. I mean, I don't listen to Twisted Sister every day, but it's to me it's definitely much better 80s hard rock kind of heavy metal than I'm not really listening to Poison a lot or something like that. Like they definitely, the makeup, they weren't doing like I've heard people refer to Twisted Sister as glam. I think that's understating it a little bit. You know what I mean,
Yeah.
man? Like, they weren't Poison or one of these
No.
bands crew. So yeah, and I've always, even aside from maybe, I mean, I'm not a huge Twisted Sister aficionado and have all the albums. I'll definitely, put them on every now and again, or if they're on, I'm not going to complain. But D. Snyder, speaking, what was that? He was speaking against the PMRC and against
Yeah.
censorship.
Yeah. Back in the 80s. Yeah.
Ed Nugent, Frank Zappa. I mean, maybe that's a little far removed for younger people now, but that was very important for I remember my mom showing me that when it was on TV, and showing me that when it was on MTV News or whatever it was, or whatever documentary. And I always thought D. Snyder was a cool, respectable Long Island musician, man. I took an uncle of mine to see Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons at the Westbury Theater here in Long Island. Great show.
Yeah. I
Um,
love Frankie Valli. Love him.
and it's a theater in the round, so that the audience is all around. And D. Snyder and his wife were like right across from us. You couldn't miss them. You know what I mean? And I think my mom saw him at Costco many years ago or something. Everybody's got their D. Snyder sightings on Long Island. So I'm all in on Twisted Sister, man. Great band. I respect it.
It's kind of like a thing, like within like me and my little group of friends from Long Island, like that I know, like Gary and Paul, like Gary from but Gary Bennett, who was the original Black Anvil guitar player, and he plays in Sheer Terror and Death Cycle, like all these bands. When I first started hanging out with those guys, that was like we all bonded over our love for Twisted Sister. And I think a lot of it had to do with Gary being from Long Island. Paul's from Queens, but you might as well be from Long Island if you're really from that further out borough, that borderland, between Long Island and Queens. And the more people I met, like Ron Grimaldi, another big Twisted Sister fan. I don't know if you know Ron. I feel like everyone knows Ron.
Yeah, I think we've met a few times, man, over the years, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And the funny thing, a few years ago, we were on tour with Crowbar, and Kurt had a Twisted Sister tattoo.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, there's something, even though that band, maybe it's because they're from the East Coast and not LA. There was something dirtier and like more intense about them than like the other bands that they were contemporaries of. You know what I mean?
I mean, dude. Also, I mean, if we're gonna talk about my generation and that thing, the Pee Wee Herman movie, "You're Gonna Burn in Hell." I mean, Jesus, dude, for a pre-death metal, underground metal youngster, that them shooting the music video, and I forget what kind of car it was. One of those cool '80s Cadillac boxy type of cars, if I'm recalling it correctly. And he's crawling on the hood singing, "You're gonna burn in hell." I mean, yeah, Twisted Sister was. That's like I said, you can't box him in with Motley Crue and Poison and
No.
Nelson or some shit. I mean, and even the makeup and the hair, if you want to make fun of that, they did it in such a grotesque, weird way. And those dudes seem like some tough East Coast dudes, and when you hear the story, if you go behind the scenes and listen to interviews, those guys did like 400 shows a year. They were from
Yeah.
that era. Bands were like playing 7 days a week, sometimes 2 or 3 shows a day, and those guys ate shit. I mean, there was nothing. I think one thing you could say is there was nothing like Hollywood manufactured about that band. It was just a gritty New York City, maybe a little bit of the New York Dolls, a little bit of that New York rock and roll attitude. They were. Twisted Sister, yeah, yeah. The more you got me kind of hyped up talking about it now. I want to like.
That's what I'm saying, man. It's like they're like a band that you don't even know how much you like them until you start talking about them. You know what I mean? Like you don't know how much you appreciate them. I think a lot of people, because I bring this up. I got Kurt going on this one night too on that tour about how I'm like, what's up with that tattoo, man? You're from New Orleans. How do you know about Twisted Sister? You know what I mean? And then he just went into this whole thing about Sister, and he has a Type O tattoo as well. And I was just like, what do you know about these guys? You're from the South. You know what I mean? From Louisiana. Like, but yeah, but Sister though, there's something about that band that is just different. You know what I'm trying to say?
I think it's got a really cool New York City, even though it's Long Island, but kind of like people associate that working class gritty East Coast thing with them, and it's almost like the makeup and the costume. It was almost like mocking the glam metal guys. I think D Snyder has said that in interviews. Like it was like, yeah, we're gonna do this, but we could kick your ass, or something like that. Like it wasn't, I don't think they were really doing it the same way the Hollywood LA strip guys were doing it. You know what I mean, man? They were
Uh,
kind of badass and different about it, man. So that, yeah, man. And also there's other stories like when you grow up going to different rehearsal studios and recording studios that are in like industrial parks on Long Island somewhere to record, the Cursed Earth demo and to record this, that, and the Buckshot Facelift album, after hours or something. You talk to producers and engineers and guys that were around back in the 80s doing live sound for whoever, and you hear stories. And so like Twisted Sister absolutely has a lot of like street cred. No one really shits on them or makes fun of them for sure, man. And in that world too, which is important.
yeah, there's a documentary I saw about them. It's like 2 hours long. It was like pretty awesome, going into their whole career. And like what you were saying before, like they were one of these like full-time 400 shows a year band before they were even on a major label. And that's the thing, there's, if you could find it, there's two, if you could find it out there online or whatever, there's these two pre major label releases they have. One is called Rough Cuts, and it's like a 4 song, I think it's a demo that got pressed on vinyl. And the other one is like a cassette called Under the Blade. And I tell you, man, you listen to those and it's like a sort of like, all right, the glam version of Celtic Frost. All right. You know how like that record, that Cold Lake record,
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like but it's still kind of tough sounding though. You know what I mean? It has like it is what it is, but there's something still about it that's still kind of sick. You know?
Well, that's the thing. If you hit Cold Lake from being Celtic Frost, it's not that cool. But if you hit Cold Lake from being Twisted Sister, then it's pretty fucking cool, you know?
Exactly. And that's like, when I was a kid, like these older guys, I played guitar in this band briefly when I was still in high school. These guys were like 22 years old, were turning me on to Twisted Sister, but they were coming at it. They weren't like into like Motley Crue. They were into like Judas Priest, Ozzy, you know, Ace Frehley and like, Kiss and all that sort of stuff. And then they're like Twisted Sister was like their thing. And I never, that was my introduction, those two releases. And then they, became like these iconic, major label, like big band. But to me, it was like at the time I was like into punk and getting into like Celtic Frost, like, and Hellhammer and stuff like that. But then like that Twisted Sister shit came to me and I was like, man, this is like, it's like walking this weird razor edge between these two things. I know
That's
I can see that I got your mind working on this stuff now.
Well, yeah, because it was something I really have a love for is like bands that are I'm trying to think of the right like bands that are kind of like metal, but not in my vernacular of extreme metal and thrash and death and all that sort of stuff. Like like going back and kind of like getting more familiar with the more like Grim Reaper, I really found a love for later in life. You know what
Oh
I mean?
yeah.
Bands
Yeah.
that's so I love exploring this kind of stuff that I missed the first time around. And while we're talking about Long Island Band, this just popped into my head because I've gotten into them a lot recently. Are you familiar with Virgin Steel?
Yeah, fuck yeah, dude. Of course. Yeah.
Long Island Band.
I didn't know they were from Long Island, actually. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I mean, you know how it is. There might have been a couple of Queens guys, but definitely mostly Long Island guys. I got their first album from Record Reserve, a record store here in Huntington. And the fan mail address is actually in Huntington Station in my town. So it was so cool. And we interviewed Mark from the band Electrocutioner from Long Island, and his uncle was actually in Virgin Steel, so he had a couple of cool stories about that, man. But obviously, that not the biggest, not as big a cultural impact as Twisted Sister, but a similar thing, like where they were doing kind of I don't know what you'd call it, like power metal. Like he's doing the kind of operatic vocals
Yeah.
sometimes, and it's a very heavy metal, warrior metal type of, hard rock early 80s thing. But there's something about it that is a little bit more tough and is like it's a little bit New York in a way. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's just got it's like I don't know. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm a little biased because it's a hometown band in a way, but again, they were doing it in like a New York way, where it was maybe a little bit more relatable to the average blue collar meathead or something. I don't know.
I don't know. This popped into my head now too. I also believe that the band Zebra might be from Long Island too.
What isn't that? Is it Randy Jackson? Is the guy's name Zebra? I'm not sure, but I'm not really too familiar with Zebra, but like I'm seeing the name my whole life. It's just not a lane I ever really like went into, but I'm positive Zebra is a Long Island band for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had like one hit, and I actually saw them perform. Like I didn't go to see them, but they were playing with in the at the Poughkeepsie Civic Center up in Poughkeepsie, right? They were opening for Molly Hatchet, Southern rock band, right? So I went to that. Zebra was the opener. Okay. They played about five originals and then the rest were Zeppelin covers. And it was like the greatest Zeppelin cover band I'd ever seen, man.
That's what it is. I'm pretty sure the guy's name is Randy Jackson.
Yeah, I
Um,
think you're right.
because I've been seeing ads for like 20 or 30 years for like I think it's like a Led Zeppelin cover band with Randy Jackson of Zebra. Like that's how it's always billed. And you'll
Yeah.
see posters at the supermarket or some shit. Like it's it'll be everywhere on Long Island for yeah. That's definitely Long Island shit. And like I definitely there yeah, he does a big Led Zeppelin thing too. You're right, man. I've just never seen it. Not that I wouldn't, go see it, but cover bands, I mean, I'm sure where you are too, there's a lot of them, but there's you
Dude,
can
yeah.
so much cover bands in Long Island, man.
Yeah. Well, dude, give us a rundown of what Reek has coming up. This is actually is coming out before all this stuff that you're talking about. So let's give us a rundown of what's going on.
Gladly. Well, like I said, we are working on the second album. We are playing the New York Death Fest 8. We're playing on Saturday, August 10th. So we're very proud to be sharing the bill with Dripping, Cephalotripsy, Stages of Decomposition, Peeling Flesh, Buzzherd, and several others. And that's go to check out Gutter Christ. Gutter Christ is booking that. Check him out on social media, buy tickets. Very happy to be playing that. We're recording. I think we're going to be doing a new project before the second album, maybe like something in the way of a single. So people can just follow us on social media, and you'll get all the news. And we have shows booked. I think through October. We're probably going to be playing about one show a month through October in the tri-state area, but the New York Death Fest is the only one that's like announced at the moment. So just follow us on social media, check it out. That Barely Breathing Fest is going to be the first weekend of August in I'm sorry, it's actually going to be the I think it's the 17th and 18th, the third weekend of August. Just check them out on social media. Check out Heavy Hole Podcast on social media. That's where I'm at. But the Barely Breathing Fest is on Long Island here, and that's the Buckshot Facelift reunion set on the Sunday of that fest. Afterbirth is playing September the 21st at the Long Beach Brewery here on Long Island. Other shows, kind of like I said, behind the scenes with my bands that just haven't been announced yet. So just check us out on social media, man. And Afterbirth, hard at work on a new album for next year. Reeking Aura, hard at work on a new album for next year. Exsanguinated, trying to make the logistics work to write that new album, so that's about it, man. Like I said, Heavy Hole Podcast is kind of my home base on social media if people want to check out more of that. So that's it, man. I really appreciate it, Mike. Thank you, man.
Now it's a full schedule, man. I'm glad to hear that you're staying real busy, man. That's awesome. And it's been a pleasure having you on, Will. What we got to do is do this more in the future.
For sure, man. We'll tap in every few months, man. Definitely, man. Maybe we'll come up with a concept, man. We'll talk shit about certain bands or certain albums.
That sounds like a great idea. I mean, that's kind of the format of the show, actually. It's like I kind of have a lot of recurring guys and we have like, topics that we talk about. So that's pretty cool.
Next time you want to talk Twisted Sister, you know who to call, man.
You got it, man. All right, have a good one. Take care.
You too, brother. Thank you, man.